Hello, everyone. Welcome. Happy December. I have about 4 minutes left until it's start time. Bill, can you just say something so I can make sure I can hear you okay? Bill Tobin?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, 1 second here. Okay, perfect. Great. And then Brian?
Hey, Cherie, can you hear me?
Hi. Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Good. Hey, I just sent you an email like 2 seconds ago with a few pictures in it. I don't know
Oh, okay.
if you'll have a chance to throw those up when I'm talking or not.
Sure.
On such short notice, but
Yep, definitely. We can do that.
and I just got a package in the mail today too.
Yay. Oh, good. We were going to talk about that. Congratulations. Awesome.
It was a good surprise.
Good. So welcome for those of you that are just joining. We're just giving folks a few more minutes to get logged on. Bill, do you mind talking again, Bill Tobin, just so I can make sure you sound a little faint earlier?
Okay, how's this? Is this any better?
Yep, that's better. Thank you. Sounds good. Hey, Brian, I just checked and the pictures haven't come through on our end yet, but if they do, I'll make sure and put them up. And if not, I have some other Indonesia pictures on there.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I just did it from my phone as I heard you starting to talk on the other. So they may or may not come through.
Maybe if it were a bigger file or something, but I'll keep checking.
Yeah, no problem.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. I have that it's the top of the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get started. We have an action-packed call for you this month, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I love this photo that you see there on the screen. It's actually from the Philippines where we helped families after a super typhoon hit. It's the equivalent of a Category 5 storm that struck the Philippines, and so we had a team there distributing shelter kits like the one you see here. And it's awesome to see when families really adopt it as their own little home there. And you can see there's plants out front and curtains in the window and everything. So that's really the type of recovery that you're helping to support. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on, and thank you as volunteers for helping us with, is to prepare for the worst day ever, so that when families are hit by floods or typhoons or are forced to flee their homes because of conflict, ShelterBox can be there and help those families on their worst day ever because of the work that you do out there in your community, providing awareness and also raising funds for our mission. So thank you. We have a special guest. Well, we have a couple today, but the first is Brian Glenn, who is a longtime ShelterBox ambassador, but also one of our response team members and a Rotarian as well. And many of you will remember Brian was on with us just a couple months ago because he had actually been a part of our team that responded to the earthquakes in Lombok, Indonesia. But then being newly retired, Brian was kind enough to be able to deploy again to Indonesia this year, this time in response to both earthquakes and then the tsunami that struck Sulawesi. So we're honored to have Brian on with us today. And Brian, I can let you take it from here.
Well, thanks, and just want to say hello to all my fellow ambassadors out there. But got back a few weeks ago from my second trip to Indonesia, and just wanted to highlight some of the differences on this one. So the first trip I mentioned a few months ago in Lombok was very heavily dependent on Rotary. They were very active in Lombok, and our main go-to people on every step of that way. This time in Sulawesi, it was an area that didn't have a Rotary club. There's one on the island, but it's more than a day's drive away from where we were. So so not a lot of activity with Rotary there, but still the contacts that we made through Rotary, that the people they knew there were the ones that we worked with throughout the deployment. So they introduced us to friends, and then friends of those friends. So even when Rotary's not there, they still have contacts there that we were able to use. So it still came in very, very dependent on the contacts we made with them. But what we found different at Lombok was earthquake damage. And then when we arrived in Sulawesi, we had not only the earthquake damage, but that also had caused a tsunami. So all along the shore of the bay, a lot of tsunami damage. And then new to me was liquefaction that I hadn't heard of before, and didn't realize how big a part that played. But after I arrived, I learned liquefaction is basically where the earthquake causes the groundwater to come up and mix kind of with the topsoil and turn everything into kind of quicksand, and entire neighborhoods were swallowed up. And so that was actually a lot of the deaths and destruction were caused by that further away. So we had that, and also found a big section where the entire earth had dropped, and what used to not be seaside homes were now 6 foot underwater for entire neighborhoods. So that was another little after effect of the earthquake that we hadn't expected to find. But overall, it was a lot of destruction combined throughout there, and we did at least have the advantage that the Indonesian government this time had declared a disaster and requested some international aid, although they put a lot of limits on it. So whereas in Lombok we had shelter boxes that were already in the country, we were able to distribute. In this case, we had used everything in the country we had to import, so they had a strict limit of what they allowed to import. So we brought in our standard relief tent. We brought in mosquito nets, water filters, and that's the main things that we were distributing. We were also working on locally procuring some tarps to assist with that also. So those were the key things that the people were needing, and we were able to reach about 600 families while I was there. The first week we had use of a government helicopter that aided us getting up into the mountains to the hardest to reach areas, and then After it left, we depended a lot on driving, usually 3 hours to 4 hours to get there, and then we would get 3 or 4 hours of work in, and then drive 3 to 4 hours back to make it back before dark, or as close to before dark as we could. So it was a very challenging deployment, just in the geography, landslides that were caused by the earthquakes. The monsoon season was just starting, so we had a few heavy rains while we were there, but the rest of the time the temperature was somewhere around 105 to 110 degrees in the afternoon. So even for a Texan like me, it seemed warm. So the best story I had, though, we had one community we were working with that we found on a soccer field, and we ended up providing 120 tents to that community. Some of those went to home sites, but most of them, they had over 100 set up on this soccer field, and the community was so close knit. We trained them on a few in front of the schoolhouse, and then turned them loose, and they started putting up tents, and we started critiquing them, and we came back a few days later, and the entire soccer field was filled with tents. But as I was walking through and we were inspecting different tents, I ran into to a woman named Fatnazar, and Fatnazar was sitting under the awning of the tent with a sewing machine. And we've got a picture over there. And so she had lost her home to the earthquake, but not only her home, she also had a home-based business of custom making clothes. And as you can kind of see from her sitting behind the machine there, she's very well dressed because she turned out very good quality clothes. So in this case, just a few days after she had her tent, not only did she have a new place to live, but she was back in business, able to return to earning a little money, custom making clothes for people again. So I would gladly. Oh yeah, I'd just gladly answer any questions or add anything else you'd like.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you have questions for Brian, feel free to type them into the chat box there on the right, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you. Yeah, as Brian mentioned with this particular example, it's so great when you can see people not only have a place to live, but to also be able to return to work. I know in talking to Ishan, who's another one of our SRTs, she shared that when she was in Malawi a few years ago, they used the tarps from the shelter kits and the tools to build new houses, but then they also took the farm equipment, the shovels and the hose, and were able to go over to the neighboring country of Mozambique, where they were hired more quickly as day laborers because they had their own farm equipment. And so it's something that we see a lot is, our core mission is to provide shelter, but families find so many different uses for these items and can really use this as a way to get back to work or to get food for their families. And so I love that story, Brian. Thanks for sharing. Let me just see. It looks like, okay, so there's a question. What was your own housing situation while you were deployed?
So I was on team 3 going in. So I arrived about a month after the earthquake hit, and we were able, there was one hotel in Palu that had reopened, and the team just prior to us had been able to establish some rooms there. So they still had a lot of damage to it, and some cracks in the walls. We had continuing aftershocks the entire time I was there. So we watched one of the cracks kind of grow on the stairs regular, but we kept a close eye on the structure of the hotel and felt pretty confident in it. So that was our residence throughout. But team 1 and 2 that had arrived, they actually had arranged a warehouse through a friend of a Rotarian in Jakarta, a coffee warehouse. And so when they first arrived, they got permission to use that warehouse to store our tents when they were imported, and then they actually set up a tent inside the warehouse. They were sleeping in the tent, and the wife of the owner of the warehouse was preparing them meals and bringing them to them so they didn't have to eat just MREs every night because there still weren't any restaurants reopened yet either. So I was lucky to arrive about a month afterwards. But every day when we left the hotel, because we were traveling such long distances and through landslide zones, we always left with the assumption that if a little rain or another shake caused a landslide, the road would be closed. So we always carried a separate pup tent with us and everything, prepared to spend the night just wherever we were working that day if we weren't able to return. But kept our fingers crossed and stayed pretty lucky throughout and got to stay in the hotel.
Thanks, Brian. And then what are some of the precautions the team takes if you know there are active aftershocks in the area?
Yeah, and that's one, and I was used to it because Lombok had been a real active seismic zone. We'd even had another 7.0 earthquake while I was in that area. So I'd already had a lot of practice, but we have procedures for earthquakes where we check the hotel. We make sure we have extra ways out. From the minute we check into the hotel, we find our extra exit routes, and we practice going out our exit routes and going to a meeting place outside. We always keep our bag packed, our backpack packed right by the door. So any little quake, and most of them seem like 4 a.m. was almost the exact time that quakes like to hit. Aftershocks did. So a lot of times we hopped up, threw on a pair of flip flops, grabbed our boots and our bag, and out the door and met out near the street in front of the hotel and made sure that the shaking stopped before we went inside. And likewise, we also had tsunami plans, which in this case we were far enough in from the water that we didn't have to concentrate on that a lot. But in Lombok, we were right near the water, and so we also had tsunami evacuation plans and things in place. So we've got procedures of what to look for, and we practice those as soon as we arrive and make sure everyone's clear before we fall asleep the first night.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Well, it looks like those are all the questions. I have family up in Alaska, so I'll be sure to share some of your aftershock tips with them because they're still experiencing a lot. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you. Brian, appreciate your service. And then I know that you're incredibly active also when you're back home, sharing with Rotary clubs the ShelterBox message and your stories. And so we're really excited to be able to announce today that Brian Glenn is our newest member to the ShelterBox Hall of Fame. So that means he's raised over $100,000 for this organization, which is absolutely incredible. And he joins an esteemed group of 30 other ambassadors. So thank you, Brian. You're welcome to give an acceptance speech. Anything you'd like to give as a tip for other ambassadors who are just getting started?
Well, yeah, and it was really a very well timed surprise because right before I logged on for the call, I'd opened up my mail and found that today. So I literally just found out about 15 minutes before the call started, and I hadn't.
Planned it that way.
Yes, very very well planned. So it was a nice surprise, but just sharing the story is all it takes, and like I say, I really hadn't tracked the donations. I just shared the story with lots of people and lots of Rotary clubs, and you know it's hard to imagine that that's amounted to $100,000, but I know that it has, and from being out in the field as a response team member, then I can picture the faces of the 100 plus families that's made such a difference in their life. So it really means a lot. But sharing the personal stories, the facts of ShelterBox and what's in a box is always good. But sharing the personal stories, like the story of Fat Nazar, going back, getting a new home, and restoring your business. Those are the ones that people really like to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And some folks have been typing in congratulations. Chris Alexander says congrats, as well as Bill Woodard, and that we're all very proud of you. So very well deserved. Thank you. Yeah, and exactly. That's why we have our SRTs on the call, so that you can hear from folks like Brian, who were just there on the ground, some of those stories that you can then add to your presentations and take back and share. We also have an asset bank that has tons of images, including the ones you saw today, as well as some case studies that are written up. So again, if you're looking for ideas or inspiration, that's another great place to go as well for some of those stories too. So thank you, Brian. I think you may be leaving us a bit early today, but super appreciate your time, and congratulations again.
You're very welcome. And yeah, I do have to leave early because I'm going to a Rotary fundraiser that starts in a little over an hour, or about 2 hours. So I've got to go get a tent set up and maybe add a few more $1,000. Hopefully,
so you'll be on your way to your next 100,000. Great. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Bye bye. Great. So if I could just take a step back here. So with our agenda, we just had our Indonesia update from Brian Glenn. Again, there's also information on our website at shelterboxusa.org/news if you're ever wondering about our current deployments or wanting to get some more information and stories. Next, we'll jump into our ambassador shout outs and get to really highlight the great things that our team has been doing out in the field. We have a new ambassador of the month to announce. And then we have some statistics because we are drawing to the end of 2018. I have pretty solid figures around how many people will have helped this year, barring any big disasters in the last week or so of the year, but wanted to share kind of a quick 2018 year in review. And then as we get into January, we'll solidify those numbers, but wanted to give you a quick look at that. We also have Bill Tobin joining us, who is already a member of the Hall of Fame, but we're really excited because for years, Bill has worked with youth and with Rotary clubs and with really, I think, every aspect of the community to be able to engage people in the ShelterBox mission. So he's got some tips and tricks to share. And then Cherie and I have some reminders, and then we'll cover our current deployments as well. So Cherie, I can let you take it from here as you share all of the great things our ambassadors have been doing.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I want to highlight our top 10 fundraisers in November. So thank you for all the hard work to everybody. Without any of you, we couldn't continue the work that we're doing. But a big shout out to Catherine, Mike, Nancy, Bill, Ryan, Tom and Marie, Greg, Alan, Marshall, and Rich. We have ambassadors on here who have been with us for a matter of months and those who have been with us for years. So we just thank you for sharing your passion in and around your community. This month in November, our team raised $104,000, and that's very impressive. That equated to way more than 234 hours out in the field sharing your ShelterBox story. So thank you to all. And another congratulations is in order for this team, because for the first time we had 100% coverage at the Zone Institutes around the nation. That means that ShelterBox was set up in every Hall of Friendship, and in Reno, Bill Woodard was actually able to do a presentation. First time this year. We want to thank Bill Woodard, Ryder Evans, Stephen Lease, Wayne Childs, Holly Graff, Sarah, all of those who went around and traveled. But for these guys here, for those helping us to finish Zone Institute strong in 2018. Special shout out and just acknowledgement here. Greg was able to present at the Hudson Daybreak Rotary Club, and he shared that in 2005, this area was raising more than $500,000 for ShelterBox. So we're grateful for Greg for reconnecting with these amazing ShelterBox supporters. He couldn't be on the call today, but I hope that he can share with us more about this club's history in the future. Now, Laura has mastered the Service Above selfie. If you haven't seen Service Above selfie, you need to get on Facebook. It goes great, goes over well with Rotarian audiences. But here, Laura, she's in 2 different clubs. We've got her with the exchange student participant she was invited to present to after another presentation she had done. So they were very engaged and that they just might find a way to donate. Additionally, she presented to the Rotary Club of West Columbia at 7:30 in the morning, and almost all of their 14 members attended. They are likely to be a hero club. Great job, Laura. And Frank, he's showing us some serious sizzle here with the Hot Rocks of Alberton Rotary Club. They had a $700 donation on the spot, and some other donations from individual members. And we are just grateful that he is out there. He just recently had back surgery. He was out there and he was sharing ShelterBox on the road. So thank you, Frank. I do believe we have Carol Pipitone on the road with us, and she was preparing here in this picture. She was preparing to represent ShelterBox at the Indio Tamale Festival, where they were expecting 60,000 people. And I do believe she's had some fruitful results from being out in the community. Sarah, do you see Carol on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Carol, tell us about these adventures you've been having.
Okay, for the last 2 weekends, I've been doing festivals. The first one was the Tamale Festival in Indio. It was the 27th year, and I think it's the 3rd and 4th year I presented out there. 2-day festival, 60,000 people a day. So it's so encouraging that people stop by the tent. I sent you some more pictures to the Ambassador Facebook page just a little while ago today. Showing the amount of people there, but it's hard to walk behind these people because there's so many people there. So it was a good showing there. And then this weekend I had a Rotary Festival. So the District 5330 put on a festival with some beach boys. Actually, it was a beach boy, David Marks, I believe. And a band, and so there was a nice crowd there with a lot of Rotary clubs attending. So what I'd like to say about the Rotary clubs is new members in Rotary are not aware of ShelterBox really, and I don't know whether that's because the people are doing different international projects, but the Rotarians that came to the tent this weekend were really interested with the ShelterBox and to see it in real life. So I don't know if it's because they've got a lot of new members or they're just not promoting us in the club. So I'm going to have to do a better job visiting the club and getting to their conferences. One interesting fact that I found out this weekend at the Rotary Festival, they invited the Red Cross to be there, the American Red Cross. So I went and introduced myself. I said, do you know who I am? And guess what they said?
You got me. What did they say, Carol?
We don't know who you are.
Okay. And how did you change that?
I invited them to come and see the tent. But, you know, one of my little speeches when I show people the tent is we work alongside the Red Cross. And they had no idea who we were. It was just incredible. So I don't know if there's any outreach that we can do there to the Red Cross so that they can train their people to say, you know, we work alongside you. So anyway, we've had gorgeous weather out here in the desert. So we've been lucky, and it's our season now, so you'll be seeing some more activity from me. Couldn't do anything in the summer because it was 125 degrees. Another interesting fact was the Interact clubs from the local high schools. Those kids were so interested and encouraged. They want to go back to their schools and get their group to do some fundraising for us. So I don't know if we have anything. I know there's a fundraising booklet for the younger kids, but is there anything that we can find out or give to the Interact clubs that they can use for fundraising ideas?
Absolutely, Carol. We have that and more. We'll make sure that we get those items posted, one on Facebook so that people know where they're at to find them on the Ambassador portal, but we're going to get you equipped. I am so grateful that you are making sure that all of the community members, both those in Rotary and those without, are aware of ShelterBox. I think just like Rotary, right, we'll meet Rotarians that haven't yet heard of ShelterBox, looks like we're experiencing that with some of the partners we work with, and it's our job to make sure that they know who we are and what we're able to do around the world. So we're so grateful that you're out in the community. The weather's nice and that you're able to get out there and continue sharing ShelterBox, Carol. So everybody stay tuned for those resources that Carol's asking about so we can get everybody equipped for all those groups.
Yeah, thank you. And
I'm sorry. Okay, going forward, Carol, we don't want to run out of time. We have an action-packed agenda. I do want to move forward here. We have the grants that I want to let you know. Tom and Marie, they were at their annual Christmas dinner. They were handed a check for $1,000, and it was an anonymous donation from someone who had seen their ShelterBox display at an annual pancake breakfast. And they gave us that reminder that you just never know who you might influence, and it's so true. So thank you, Tom and Marie. You pitch that tent everywhere you go, and you're obviously making an impact and reaching hearts everywhere in your community. And we have Bill Zuki, who works with Henry Tur out in Pennsylvania, and they received a donation for $1,250 from the Kutztown Rotary Club after their annual fundraiser. These two onboarded with us in the summer to officially be the ShelterBox representatives in their district, and they've just hit the ground running, and they've covered a lot of ground in the short amount of time that they've been on the team in an official capacity. So I want to thank you, Bill and Henry, for all of the work that you do to share ShelterBox in and around your community.
And Sheree, Bill's on with us today. Bill, is there anything you wanted to add about this event?
No, it was a nice dinner, and we were one of about a dozen organizations that received donations. So it's a very active club, and they do a lot of fundraising, and it hopefully will continue.
Awesome. We're excited to have you on the team. Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Now, Wayne not only represented ShelterBox at Zone Institute, but he can also be seen in and around his community, setting up a tent anywhere and everywhere. And he really likes to take out-of-the-box ideas and really set up places outside of Rotary. So here we have him set up at the 2018 Star Tides. It's a demo out at George Mason University. He's participated in these events since the project began. It's such a good opportunity to connect with interested students and faculty. And then we also have him set up at the annual Centralville Days Community Festival. So thank you, Wayne, so much for getting out. On the next image we have here on the screen, we have a Rotaractor who ended up being at an Ashland Rotary Club presentation just right after Peggy and Malcolm had gone to the Southern University Rotaract Club. So they presented, and now this is how they're making and selling these ornaments. This is how they're raising money for ShelterBox. So beautiful ornaments, passionate students. Thank you, Peggy, for helping to light that passion in them. And of course, the expedition impact continues. Eric has had quite a few presentations since coming out of the river. We have him here at the Rotary Club of Marco Island, where they handed him $1,000. We're so grateful for that. But he's also met with the Rotary Club of Naples Collier, if I got that right, and the Rotary Club of Fort Myers South. And I can tell you, having gone to his own institute where he was represented, everybody in Florida knew about Eric Elsey and the Mississippi expedition. So that was a treat.
Eric, I know you're on with us today. Anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it. It was just really interesting hearing about the deployment to Indonesia, and got several more expedition presentations after the first of the year. So this will probably be the last time I talk to everybody before the holidays. So I hope everybody has a very Merry Christmas, and look forward to a good 2019.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And just so everybody knows, our vote for Eric period ended on December 5th, and we'll find out the results of that contest in March. There's some additional judging that happens, and the votes were one element of it, but there are some other pieces that will take place. So while we don't have to click and vote every day, we can use our fingers to keep them crossed. And I hope that Eric will qualify for the big prize there. So thanks, Eric.
A little bit more about Eric. A couple of weeks ago, if you haven't seen already, Holly posted that the expedition had raised $65,149.59 as of that date. And somehow she decided to do the math, and she figured out that that is exactly $25.52 per mile of the expedition. And that's just crazy. So congratulations, Erica. And no, I wasn't figuring and messing with the numbers. That just ended up being what it was. And also pointing out that Eric has been writing these thank you cards for his supporters from the expedition. And Lewis Turpin up in New York went to Rotary Club, and they were mentioning that they got one. And so just the impact of a thank you note. So your expedition continues to spread far and wide. Now, Carrie and the Santa Barbara team had some fun with Dennis Quaid, who got to check out the inner space of the ShelterBox relief tent. So that's cool. Sarah, I don't know if you have more information on that, but what cool ShelterBox exposure there.
Yeah, we've participated for a few years now at an event called Fest Forums, where different festivals from across the country come and share ideas. And so we're there, as we are in many places, sharing the ShelterBox story, and Dennis Quaid was among those being honored that night. So the team had some time to talk to him, and they're working to see if his band would be willing to play at our next ShelterBox fundraiser in Santa Barbara. So more to come.
Awesome. Thank you for elaborating on that. Do want to take a moment to highlight one of our response team members, ambassadors, Bill Decker, who he got to spend some time in Indonesia. He actually got to go to their zone, and he was finishing up his time in Asia by representing ShelterBox at the International Zone Institute. There's key leaders there that have converged from 24 Asian countries to learn a little bit about ShelterBox work, among other engaging topics in the Rotary world. He said it was quite an interesting and rewarding month, and he wanted to make sure that we pass along thanks to all staff, volunteers, and donors who have supported ShelterBox work in Indonesia. So what a touching follow-up and report back for him that he got to experience that. And then I have a special shout out. So Ned Morris and Glenn Harris actually got to attend this Interact event up in Sequim, Washington. These students were so driven by the work of ShelterBox and the ability to provide light to those who have been displaced by disaster that they held a 24-hour cyclothon. They raised over $3,000, and for 24 hours there was somebody on that bike riding for ShelterBox, and they raised enough money to cover 120 luminates for ShelterBox. So thank you, gentlemen, for going and sharing ShelterBox with that community, and what an awesome event and exposure for us. Now, if anybody has anything to add, we do want to give you a few minutes to yourself to shout out your own successes. We may not have had pictures, but we sure love to hear from you.
Yeah, so once again, if you do have a success you'd like to share that we didn't get to, please just type us a little note in the chat box or raise your hand, and we would be happy to include you as well and have you share your story. Shuri, I'm not seeing any at the moment, but if more come through as we're talking, I'll be sure and call them out.
Oh, absolutely. But we do have to recognize our Ambassador of the Month, and I'm very honored to recognize Frank Spears as the Ambassador of the Month. You may have heard us refer to him as the Sizzle Spears, and we mentioned Sizzle with Frank a lot. Well, Frank joined the Ambassador team in March of this year, actually, and after Frank attended our SAFE program, only a few weeks of being in the role, he had fire in his belly, and he fell in love with our mission, quickly began to sell the sizzle of the steak, as he says it. He has seen the return on his passion, having fast success. His drive and spark quickly made him a leader amongst our team. And Frank, we thank you for the sizzle you share with us every day.
And Frank, I know you're on the call with us today. Congratulations and thank you. Anything you want to share as advice for your fellow ambassadors?
Well, first of all, I'm just overwhelmed. This is a huge Christmas surprise. Thank you, ladies. The only thing I can say is just keep telling the story, keep telling the story, keep telling the story. And as Bill Woodward told me, the money will come. And what a great honor to be amongst some incredible people. And I also say to both you fine ladies, you just inspire me amazingly. So thank you, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. While Cherie was talking about our Ambassador of the Month, we did have a question come in. So from a new ambassador, he wants to know how important it is to have a full tent and how many people does it take to set one up. So I would love to just throw that out there to some of our veteran ambassadors. I know how I feel about setting up the tent and how my husband feels about it, but how many of you use the tent at all of your meetings, or is it just at festivals, or who would like to tackle that one? I know we've got some veterans on the phone. Anyone want to raise their hand and share about the answer there? Bill, I see you raised your hand. Thank you, Bill Woodard.
Thanks for asking the question. I have found that the story exceeds the tent, and I seldom set a tent up for a club presentation anymore. Certainly for district conference, zone conference, and that kind of thing, a tent is helpful. But I find that if I take some of the key items in the tote box, the water filter, the illuminated light in particular, that suffices. The story itself is such a rich and exciting story. The tent is not a critical piece of it. At times, you'll have a club ask for the tent, and I know we've got a couple of ambassadors here in the Northwest, down in the Eugene area, Greg Vick and Kieran Walsh, who use the tent in really wonderful marketing ways. They, for instance, set the tent up right at the entry of the room that the meeting is being held in, so that every Rotarian has to walk through that tent to get to the meeting. That's a great showstopper. But very honestly, the story is far more important than the tent, from my experience. Thanks for asking.
Great, thank you, Bill. And I've got a couple other people weighing in really quick. Eric, would you like to share?
Well,
Eric,
I'd like.
Can
you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I concur with Bill, and doing some tag team work with Mr. Ned Morris on a few things. Although the tent is impressive and is very helpful, as Bill mentioned, in district conferences, zone meetings, and so on. Again, I think the other collateral material, or the photos, the slideshow, the totem box with a few items, those are all things that we've gotten a lot of warm responses on, as well as it also allows us the opportunity to talk about the shelter kits, which, as we all know, have become a big part of our arsenal of tools that we deploy. So I think that, it's up to the individual ambassador and so on, but don't feel that you can't do an effective presentation without the tent up, is basically my message.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, and I would say it takes maybe half an hour to 45 minutes to set up the tent, depending on how many helpers you have. But one of our ambassadors, Carol, who we just heard from, said that she and a friend will set up the poles and everything and get it ready, and then look for a couple people to help or pop it up. And that's something I know has worked well for me as well. And most people are recommending that there would be 4 people at that point to help just get it propped up. And so oftentimes a Rotarian is willing to jump in and help. So thank you. That was a great question. There's also a video online, and we'll post it to our Facebook page again too, just to keep it fresh. But it shows you how to set up the tent and gives some tips as well. So there is a certain way to do it that makes it go a bit more smoothly, and also a good way to take it down too. And if you get a chance, we get a lot of practice doing it at the ShelterBox Ambassador Field Experience that we do in April in Texas. So we'd love to have you join us there. Okay, great. So jumping ahead to, as promised, kind of the year in numbers, we've responded 18 different times in 2018. So 8 of those were countries that were affected by conflict. So some of our longer protracted deployments, like in Syria and Iraq and the Lake Chad Basin. But then we also responded to 10 different natural disasters because of the work that you enabled. So everything from tropical cyclones to earthquakes to floods and drought. So thank you for your incredible support. Here you can see the countries that we responded to, and the Philippines, we actually went 2 different times. By the end of 2018, we're estimating that we'll have helped 210,000 people. So 30,000 families are those who received emergency shelter. And then there were another 12,000 families that we supported with some of our other items. So things like mosquito nets, solar lights, cooking equipment, water carriers, and water filters. Sometimes families don't need the entire tent, but they may have a need for those other essential items. And so there you can see the breakdown of what we provided. We also had our awesome response team members give 1,120 days of their time. So thank you to everybody on that team. I know we've got some of those folks on the phone with us today, but thank you for leaving your families and for being willing to deploy and go distribute our aid across the world. And then, you know, we continue to be proud of our relationship with Rotary International, and they have partnered with us not only in providing important funding for our work, but also most of those natural disaster responses involve local Rotary clubs on the ground, as Brian mentioned earlier, helping us with storage and logistics and translation services and lodging and all of those things that are so critical to our ability to respond. So here you can just see on the screen all of the different countries where we operated and also the type of disaster we responded to in those different instances. So we'll be sharing these slides on the portal and also on Facebook, so you all will have this information. But if you wanted to use any of these slides, of course, you're welcome to. And we will be, over the next several weeks, both solidifying these year-end numbers, but also adding little videos with photos and things like that. So please do look for those as well in the coming weeks. So yes, thank you. Without further ado, I wanted to hand over the stage to Bill Tobin. As I mentioned earlier, Bill's been an incredible ambassador for us. He's also one of the members of the Hall of Fame, meaning he's raised over $100,000 for the organization. And as you can see here, he has an incredible list of credentials from different awards and Ambassador of the Year titles that he's won, and a Volunteer Service Award. So Bill, I would like to welcome you, and I know you've got a lot of awesome tips and tricks to share today, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thanks, Cherie, and also congratulations to all the ambassadors. Another incredible month of fundraising. Yeah, that's a lot of accolades and everything, but it's really not about what we've done or what we accomplished there. It's really about those stories, that one more family that we helped. You raise a little bit more money, we can reach one more family, and that to me is the most important thing there. So yeah, so Cherie sent me a kind of like 3 bullet items to address here today, and one item was the one thing I always include in a presentation. I want to kind of expand that into the things I always try to accomplish in a club visit, because the presentation is just a small part of your time at the Rotary meetings. It starts from the moment you get there, and you're usually one of the first ones there, and usually we're one of the last ones to leave. So in that entire 2 hours or so time, what can we accomplish? And one of the first things I try and find out is what is that club's youth involvement. Interact clubs, for example, they could have a huge impact. They're great fundraisers. They work together with Rotary clubs and challenges back and forth, and they really were my introduction to ShelterBox in 2010. I was an advisor to an Interact club, and the question came up, what should we do in response to Haiti? This was just days after the earthquake down there. And I said, hey, why don't you guys figure something out and look and see, find something Rotary related? And within hours, we had all discovered ShelterBox. So without Interact, I wouldn't be here today, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, so Interact clubs are, there's about 1 for every 2 to 3 Rotary clubs, and they can be school or community based, but most of the ones I've come across are school based. And if you could get in with their advice team, the Rotary advisor, and the faculty advisor, they can be a wonderful resource. Going on to Rotary Youth Exchange. Oh, I got a package. I'll let that just drop at the front. Rotary Youth Exchange, well, first and foremost, they love the pins, right? So you got to give them a Rotary pin. Always leave a pin with an exchange. If the student, if they're there, or if the club has one, they're at school that day, leave a pin for him or her. But what I also like to do when I connect with Rotary Youth Exchange is find out what countries they're from. And Cherie recently sent out an updated list of all the countries we've responded to. And if you can find an exchange student that has also had a response in their country, you have found an instant fundraiser for you. Those kids are amazed that an organization like ShelterBox has been in their country to help people. And I could speak on firsthand experience. I just finished my host period with a Bolivian exchange student, and we've been to Bolivia numerous times with ShelterBox, and it really blew him away. And he's going to try and get a service project to do with the rest of the exchange students in our district for RYE. So that's a great resource. Also, other youth exchange programs, they could be school-based, they could be community-based. This group in this picture was people to people. They were all from the Northeast part of Japan, and this was a couple hours after the tsunami, a couple of years after the earthquake and the tsunami struck there. And to know what ShelterBox had done there was just, I mean, these kids were just amazed. And one of their chaperones was actually a mayor of the town they were from. And when I told them about our response and how we had put shelter within a shelter to give families some privacy, he nearly broke down and cried. It was just an amazing moment. So that was really cool. So yeah, there's lots of exchange programs out there. Scouting. Find out from the club if they are charters to scouts. There's a couple things I like to do when I have a bunch of scouts. One is I make it a learning experience, because we're not supposed to ask them to raise funds or even approach them with ideas to raise funds. If they approach us, that's one thing, but we're not supposed to ask scouts to raise money directly. But they always have adult leaders around who are always very interested. And in this case, I talk about the importance of proper shelter, and then we see how many scouts we could stuff in a ShelterBox tent. And there was about 100 by the time this tent was filled up. Then Girl Scouts, scouts of all kinds, really, they love the dirty water challenge. So you use, this is actually the life straw, and this has kind of been phased out by ShelterBox. As far as I know, I don't see them around much anymore. We go with the first aid program or a pouch system. But to get these young girls and young men to put dirty water in the top of a filter and drink the water that comes out the other end is always kind of challenging. But once one does it, they all want to do it. And this picture shows you, I mean, there's adults around, and so they want brochures, and that's how we spread the awareness through a learning experience to try and find more revenue streams. Now the second bullet point that Cherie says, how do I engage my Rotary district? And first off, just get the district governors involved, the current one, the elect, the nominee designee, the past district governors. The more district governors you get behind ShelterBox, the more prevalent in the district ShelterBox will be. This is Bob Gearing, and just so happened his whole year was based on family camping and being outdoors, and what perfect combination for that than a ShelterBox tent. So I got a lot of mileage out of this picture that year. And also, if you are able to cross promote, if you have a district governor, you have a district conference coming up and it's in your district, a picture like this, or a picture that shows a district governor with some ShelterBox gear, cross promote it. Let the club members know that there's a district conference coming up, and hopefully there'll be a tent up there. You may or may not be able to have that, but you want to, kind of pat the district governor's back, and the district governors will pat your back, kind of that mentality, a partnership, so to speak. So getting the district governors involved is huge. Creating a newsletter. This is a lot of fun, and B, if you do happen to have a less than responsive district governor, and they do come and go, this is a way of getting the news out to the clubs, aside from the district governor. You could collect Rotary president's information, club information. Most clubs have a mailbox on either Club Runner or the Rotary club database, whatever the other one's called. It's not hard to get information into the clubs, even if you have to take it to the clubs in person. But newsletters are really neat, and the ambassador portal and all the stories we have in there. I mean, there's a year or two's worth of newsletters right there.
Yeah, definitely. Some were created by Bill, but there's some articles there too that you could take and plug into your district newsletter also. So I love that idea.
Yeah. Meet regularly with Rotary clubs. That's so big, because if you're one and done, if you just want to, notch another tally on your how many clubs you've visited sheet, you're doing a disservice, really, because you need to formulate a relationship, and it's good stewardship for any nonprofit, let alone ShelterBox, to, once you've presented to a club and you've sent them the thank you letter, and follow that up. Meet with them regularly, even if you're not on the schedule. To show up, pay the lunch fee or what have you, and hang out there for a meeting. This is what really gets clubs to get to know you, get to know ShelterBox. As much as everyone on this call right now trusts what ShelterBox does, there's a lot of Rotarians out there. If all you do is you have your 20 minutes up there on a podium, you go on, well, the next week someone else is up there with 20 minutes. So you either got forgotten, or they just don't realize the importance of the relationship between Rotary and ShelterBox. So meet regularly with clubs. Keep a good list of the succession of the club presidents, so you know who the president-elects are, you know who the president nominees are for those clubs, the interact advisors. All those key positions that you want to get to know will change almost annually. So it seems like a lot of work, but if you make some fun out of it and hit a half dozen clubs every year, or a dozen clubs, some outside your district, then meeting with clubs is a pretty good practice. You don't want to miss opportunities for contacts, for making new contacts, and probably the biggest for an ambassador is pets. Every president-elect, every district governor-elect in your district and beyond your district will be at pets. It takes some time to get into pets. If ShelterBox isn't already there, it's something that you'll probably want to work along with staff at securing a spot at the next year's pets. I know sometimes it takes a year kind of to get in there. Other times maybe you make a phone call and you're there next week. But get to pets. There's a lot of stand around time. So if you go to the next slide there, it's good for you to set up right next to the bar, as close to the bar as possible. Reason being, not that you'll need a drink. Reason being, before every luncheon or dinner or any food service at all, speakers, all that, there will be a line 20 to 30 people deep at bars like this and hotels. And if you've got a tent and some show and tell stuff and some giveaways right there near a bar, you will be a hit. You could even snake the line through the tent. I had a district conference. The bar was set up right next to the tent, and I literally had a line of people kind of going right through the ShelterBox display. So be bar friendly, and always have something they could take. I mean, that goes without saying. A business card, a pamphlet, a brochure, a wristband. People will forget about us. Even though we love ShelterBox and we think that what we said went off perfectly, people are going to walk away. Life's going to happen. They're going to forget about us. So have something they can take with them. Trying to get in with a club, either being a beneficiary at a fundraiser. If you're the beneficiary, that's hitting the jackpot. But even club socials can be a good place to put a tent up, and then you kind of seize that opportunity. And if you go one more forward, you'll see that you could, with a little bit of pre-planning, you can put the club president in a tent and make it tent jail. And until they raise $1,000, that president's not coming out. So you kind of hold them hostage. But it's a lot of fun. And like I said, there's certain people, don't just do it on a whim. There's certain people you pre-plan with, and the clubs have a lot of fun with things like that. Create a fundraiser, basically. I mean, you could do something amazing, like, I don't know, paddle down the entire Mississippi, which to this day, I'm just, Eric, you're a stud, man. That's incredible. There's been people who, basically bike around the world or across the country. You could climb Mount Kilimanjaro. You could do a marathon with a ShelterBox on your back, or something simple like what I did here, and just get a wine refrigerator donated, fill it up with a bunch of wine that's donated, and then sell raffle tickets. And, the opportunities abound when it comes to fundraising. And reaching beyond Rotary is a really important thing. Talk to members when you're at a meeting. I always say, take some brochures. If you have a business, you have a place to put them. If you're a member of the Chamber of Commerce, please hook me up with the CEO of that chamber or the president of that chamber for any opportunities to spread our word. And this was a result of one of those opportunities, getting Carrie up to speak at an innovation summit. So reach beyond Rotary is the message there. It's been said time and time again, so I won't waste much time on it. I'll just simply say that SAFE is the best volunteer training available in the world, and it's hosted by two of the nicest people in the world. Tim and Melinda do an incredible job. The volunteers and staff that's there, I can't say enough. I mean, it will make you a Hall of Fame member times 2 if you attend SAFE. You'll make the Hall of Fame before you know it.
Yep, and this year's event is April 5th through 7th, so that first weekend of April. And if you go to shelterboxusa.org/safe, you can get all the information and register there.
Excellent. And I think the last one I have here is make it personal. And I mean that a couple different ways. One, be invested. Are you giving? I give every month. I mean, it's great to talk about it. We give our time. That's certainly worth a lot to us. But I know if I could give a little bit every month, I'm helping a family every year. And that's something to really rest your head on at the end of the night and feel good about. But also at clubs, encourage not just the club to give, but individual donors. If you just get one Rotarian to donate $84 a month over the course of the year, that one Rotarian has become a superhero because they just made their club a bronze hero club. Think about that. $84 a month, one Rotarian from one club makes that commitment. They put the club's name down there, and that's a bronze hero club. So do the math. All you need is 3 Rotarians to be silver and 5 to be gold. It just makes sense to approach that at an individual Rotarian level, and they could be the superhero for their club hero. Major gifts, those are important, and there is some leeway on how that money is, how it's directed. So if someone approaches with a major gift, get them in touch with staff, put it in your ambassador's report, and let them know there's someone who's dangling 25 grand out there, because there could be a lot of good done with that kind of money. Don't just think that everything can't be disaster specific, because in certain instances there can be a little bit of exceptions made to that if what I've seen it done in the past. And then finally, plan giving. When you run out of time, it doesn't mean you can't still make a difference. So be sure and let clubs know that after they go, they can still be giving. And speaking of out of time, it looks like I'm out of time. So thanks, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. And so many of the great ideas so many of us use are ones you've come up with. So we super appreciate you sharing these awesome ideas today. Bill's right. We're at the end of our time. So if anyone has to jump off, please do. If not, we'll just go for about 5 more minutes, and that part will be on the recording too if you have to miss it. So if anyone has questions for Bill, feel free to type them in the chat box. We've just got a couple quick staff updates. One is that December is a huge time for giving. So about a third of annual giving happens in December. And so letting friends and family members know that they can give to support ShelterBox is a really great thing to be doing at this time of year. So whether it's your Rotary Club or, friends and family that you talk to on a regular basis, there are many different ways to get involved during the month of December, but really just putting the word out there. We have a program for global gifts where people could donate a solar light or a tent and give that gift to a family in need. And we also have ways for, as Bill mentioned, ambassadors to donate as well. So a couple quick year-end reminders. One is that if you do have any outstanding donations or checks, if you could please send those in to us. We work every year to kind of collect every last dime, but also to make sure that we can get tax receipts out. So if you would please send in to our headquarters and the addresses on the website any donations that you may be sitting on, if you could get those in. We also have available on the portal, and we can repost on the Facebook page, an in-kind donation form. So if you've done a lot of driving this year on our behalf or paid for some hotel rooms or that type of thing, or maybe you've purchased a space that you used for a ShelterBox event, we can provide you with in-kind donation forms for those donations. So please do send those our way as well. Making a donation if you'd like to give a personal gift, and there's possible tax implications with that, but before the end of the year is a good time to get those in. And then really looking ahead to 2019, our Rotary Relations Committee had some ideas for us and shared that this is a good time to really plan for the coming year. And it's also a time to be inviting clubs to give, as well as thanking those who gave during the 2018 year. So going back and thanking those top Rotary donors, getting the year started strong. So right now could be when we're setting up important meetings that would take place in Q1. It's also a good time to be scheduling presence. We just heard Bill show us great examples about president-elect training seminars and district conferences and, setting up near the bar and all those great tips. But really now is the time of year when you want to be getting on to the schedule and the agenda for those types of activities, since they do happen in the beginning of the year. And then we do have, thanks to the Rotary Relations Committee, a great Rotary planning tool. So if you're wanting to organize all those different tips Bill gave into kind of one place, we have available on the Ambassador portal a Rotary year planning tool. And so since we're starting a new calendar year, it's a good time just to sit down and plot out the next 6 months or so. So know that that's a great tool to be able to do that. Just wanted to also announce that we've extended our Light the Way challenge. So our Brighten Lives challenge is for those who would like to host a Shine event. And we've extended that until February. We know there were some people who couldn't quite get theirs together before the holidays, but talked about having one early next year. So it's possible to do Shine events continuing really all throughout the year. We had some done in the summertime last year as well, where our Illuminate lanterns were strung outside in more of a picnic type setting too. So know that there are resources available, and that challenge is continuing until February. We also wanted to let you know that we're going to be expanding our volunteer opportunities. So you all serve as our ambassadors, which is really the gold standard for our volunteer positions. But if there are people who just want to fundraise, we have opportunities for them. We're calling them our change makers, advocates. So those who want to share ShelterBox stories with their friends and be a voice for ShelterBox within their community will have a role for that. Our liaisons or club champions are the folks within Rotary clubs who help to promote what it is that ShelterBox doing. And then of course our response team members who actually go and deliver the aid. So we wanted to have more levels where people could get involved with our organization with the hope of potentially moving up to ambassador someday. But we know not everybody has the time that you may, or the energy, and may look for a slightly lesser role. So we are adding the change maker and the advocate as well. So look forward for some more information on that. I will skip over the operations update for now since we're out of time, but please just go to shelterboxusa.org/news or check our Facebook page for the latest on where we are today. But as you can see, we still are deployed in a number of different places across the globe as we work to deliver more shelter to families in desperate need. So Bill, we got a thank you, and they said great ideas, Bill. So appreciated having you on today. Thank you again to Brian, both for his Hall of Fame status and also for sharing about his most recent deployment. If there's a piece we've not gotten to, please shoot Cherie or I an email and we'll be happy to help. So thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. Wishing everybody a safe and happy holiday season, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.